The desert stretched for miles in every direction, endless waves of sand glowing under the hot sun. The expedition team moved slowly across the golden dunes, their camels carrying supplies, water, and tools. At the front walked Daniel, a young archaeologist who had spent years studying old maps and forgotten legends. He believed there was something hidden under the sands, something the ancient pharaohs had kept secret from the world. For weeks, the team had searched near the broken ruins of a forgotten pyramid. Many said the place was cursed, that the desert swallowed all who came too close, but Daniel refused to turn back. His father had once told him stories about the pharaoh's hidden chamber, a place where gold shone so bright it blinded anyone who entered. Most people thought it was only a myth, but Daniel wanted to prove the story true. On the 42nd day of digging, one of the workers shouted. The team gathered quickly and saw a stone slab half buried in the sand. Unlike the crumbled walls around it, the slab was perfectly smooth, marked with strange lines that had not faded even after thousands of years. Daniel's heart raced. This was no ordinary stone. It looked almost polished, as if it had been made yesterday. They cleared the sand carefully, brushing it away until the full outline of a doorway appeared. The air around the stone felt cooler, as though the slab held back something from deep inside the earth. Daniel stepped closer and ran his hand across the surface. The lines on the stone glowed faintly, catching the sunlight in a way that made them shimmer like metal. "It is not paint," Daniel whispered. "It is part of the stone itself." The others watched him with unease. Some muttered that they should leave it alone, but Daniel pressed forward. He directed the workers to set up pulleys and ropes. With great effort, they pulled the slab outward. Dust and ancient air rushed past them, carrying the smell of stone that had not seen light in thousands of years. Behind the slab was a staircase that led downward into darkness. The steps were steep, carved with sharp precision. Daniel lit a torch, its fire flickering against the walls, and led the way inside. The others followed slowly, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the underground passage. As they descended, the walls began to change. At first, they were plain stone, but soon, thin veins of gold appeared, running like rivers through the rock. The deeper they went, the brighter the gold seemed to shine, until it looked as if light itself was flowing through the walls. The torches became unnecessary. The chamber was glowing on its own. When they finally reached the bottom, the passage opened into a vast hall. The walls, ceiling, and even the floor were covered with gold so bright that it hurt their eyes. The light was not a reflection of their torches, but came from the gold itself, pulsing like the rays of the sun. Several of the workers shielded their faces, unable to look directly at it. Daniel stood frozen at the entrance, his breath caught in his throat. The hall was larger than any tomb he had ever seen. In the center stood a massive golden throne, and behind it, a wall decorated with strange patterns that looked less like art and more like symbols of some forgotten language. One of the workers cried out and stumbled back, his eyes watering from the blinding glow. Another man dropped his torch and covered his face. The light was too strong, burning into their vision. But Daniel forced himself to keep looking. He tied a piece of cloth over his eyes, dimming the brightness, and slowly stepped forward. The air inside the chamber felt heavy, filled with an energy that made his skin prickle. Every sound echoed strangely, as if the gold itself was alive and listening. Daniel reached the throne and placed his hand on the armrest. It was warm, almost hot, as though sunlight had been trapped inside it for centuries. "This is no ordinary chamber," Daniel whispered to himself. "This is something else entirely." The others gathered near the entrance, afraid to move closer. They begged Daniel to leave, but he shook his head. The patterns on the wall drew his attention. They were not random designs. They looked like lines of circuitry, glowing faintly beneath the golden surface. Daniel leaned closer, his fingers tracing the shapes. He realized then that this chamber was not just a tomb or a treasure room. It was a machine built in a time when humans should not have been capable of such work. The pharaoh who had ruled here must have possessed knowledge far beyond what history recorded. As the realization struck him, the light in the chamber grew brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. Daniel stepped back, but he did not feel fear. He felt wonder. The pharaoh's sun chamber was real, and its secrets were far greater than he had ever imagined. The workers, however, were terrified. Some covered their eyes completely and fled back up the stairs. Only a few remained, their faces pale as they watched the chamber breathe with golden light. Daniel knew then that his journey had only begun. What lay within this chamber was not simply treasure. It was a secret buried by time, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. And now, that someone was him. The glow from the golden walls continued to pulse, filling the hall with a light brighter than the desert sun above. Daniel tightened the cloth around his eyes, took a deep breath, and prepared to go even deeper into the Pharaoh's secret. Daniel stood inside the golden hall, his cloth-wrapped eyes barely able to handle the glow. The walls seemed alive, sending waves of light that grew brighter every moment. He could hear the soft hum of energy moving through the golden patterns like a low song echoing through the stone. Behind him, several workers cried out again. One man pressed his hands against his eyes, falling to his knees. Another staggered backward toward the stairway, shouting that the chamber was cursed. Their voices shook with fear. Daniel turned toward them. "Cover your eyes. Use cloth. Do not look directly at the walls," he ordered. His voice was firm, but few listened. The glow had already burned into their vision, leaving them blinded by spots of light. Some stumbled out of the chamber, while others pressed their backs against the entrance wall, afraid to move deeper. Only a handful stayed with Daniel. Among them was Omar, a quiet man who had worked on many digs before. He tightened a scarf across his face and nodded. "I will stay. This place is not normal, but I will not leave you alone." Daniel gave him a grateful look. He needed help if he was going to unlock the secrets of this place. As they moved further into the hall, the light pulsed stronger. It was no longer only brightness, it carried heat, pressing against their skin. Daniel's arms felt warm, then hot, as if he were standing under the midday sun with no shelter. He realized this was why so many could not bear the chamber. The gold was not just shining. It was burning with energy. They reached the far end of the hall where the strange symbols covered the wall behind the throne. Daniel studied them carefully. They were not written like normal hieroglyphs. Instead, they formed lines that connected with each other, weaving a design that looked like the inside of a machine. Some of the lines glowed brighter than others, as though guiding him toward a pattern. He touched one of the glowing marks, and the wall responded. A thin beam of light shot out, striking the ceiling above. The chamber trembled softly, and more of the golden walls lit up in sequence. The light grew so intense that Omar covered his face with both hands. "Daniel, stop," Omar shouted. "It will blind us all." Daniel pulled his hand back quickly, and the beam faded. But the chamber did not return to its original glow. Instead, the entire hall began to throb like a heartbeat, brighter with each pulse. Daniel realized he had activated something. The Pharaoh's sun chamber was not only a resting place. It was alive, waiting for someone to awaken it. The air grew heavy, almost hard to breathe. Daniel felt sweat run down his face, though the desert night outside should have been cool. He adjusted the cloth over his eyes again and turned to Omar. "This is not treasure," he said softly. "This is power. Something ancient and dangerous." Omar frowned. "Then we should seal it again. No man should stand in such a place. If this is the Pharaoh's curse, we must respect it." But Daniel shook his head. "It is not a curse. It is knowledge. The Pharaoh built this chamber to hide something greater than gold." A sudden cry echoed from near the entrance. One of the men who had stayed behind staggered forward, his hands pressed to his face. He screamed in pain and collapsed, unable to open his eyes. The light had burned him. Omar rushed to help, covering the man's eyes with cloth, but it was too late. The glow had scarred his vision. Daniel's chest tightened. The legends had been true. The Pharaoh's gold blinded those who looked upon it. Yet the truth was not simple gold. It was energy, a light that punished anyone who came unprepared. The chamber trembled again, louder this time. A deep rumble shook the floor, sending dust falling from the ceiling. Daniel steadied himself against the throne. The glowing lines across the walls shifted like rivers changing their course. "Do you hear it?" Daniel asked, his voice trembling. Omar listened, and his eyes widened. Beneath the hum of the light, a new sound had risen, a slow rhythm like a beating heart. The chamber was alive, or something inside it was. Fear spread across the faces of the men. Some fled back up the stairs, desperate to escape the burning glow. Only Daniel and Omar remained near the throne, their cloth-wrapped eyes fixed on the shifting patterns. Daniel whispered, "The Pharaoh was not only a king. He was guarding this. Whatever this is, it has been sleeping for thousands of years." Omar shook his head in disbelief. "And you would wake it?" Daniel hesitated. Part of him wanted to leave, to seal the stone slab again and forget what he had seen. but another part of him burned with curiosity. He had dedicated his life to uncovering the truth of the ancients. Now that truth stood before him, pulsing with light strong enough to blind the unworthy. He stepped closer to the throne once more, placing both hands on its golden surface. The warmth ran through his arms, up into his chest, filling him with strength and fear at the same time. The throne was not just a seat, it was a key. As he touched it, the walls around him flared, so bright that even the cloth could not protect his eyes fully. He cried out, but he did not let go. The chamber roared with light, and for a moment the entire hall felt like the center of the sun. Then, just as suddenly, the glow dimmed. The heartbeat faded and silence returned. Daniel fell to his knees, gasping for air. His hands still tingled from the power that had surged through him. Omar rushed forward. "You could have killed yourself." Daniel looked up at the throne. The golden surface was glowing faintly, softer than before, but still alive. He whispered, "No, Omar, I did not die. I touched the Pharaoh's light and it let me go. It knows I am here." The desert above was silent, but within the chamber, Daniel had awakened something that had been waiting for thousands of years. Daniel stood weakly near the throne, his chest still rising and falling fast. The glow in the chamber had settled, but it was no longer the same. The light was softer, warmer, as though the chamber itself was watching him. Omar kept close by, nervous and unsure. The other men had already left, their fear greater than their curiosity. Daniel pressed his hand against the golden wall. The strange lines pulsed faintly, guiding his eyes toward carvings he had not noticed before. At first he thought they were normal hieroglyphs, the kind he had studied in countless temples. But as he looked closer, he realized these symbols were different. They told a story, one not found in any history book. The first carving showed a pharaoh standing tall, his crown shining like the sun. Beside him were figures unlike any Daniel had seen before. They were taller than men, with elongated heads and arms that reached almost to their knees. Their eyes were carved as large ovals, glowing faintly with the same light that pulsed through the chamber. Omar stepped closer, his voice uncertain. "Are those gods?" "They do not look like men." Daniel shook his head. "Not gods. Something else. Look at their hands. They hold no weapons, no tools. They carry spheres of light, the same light that fills this chamber." The next carving showed the pharaoh kneeling before these tall figures. They were offering him the glowing spheres, and above them, strange shapes filled the sky. Daniel recognized the shapes instantly. They were not stars. They looked like ships, vast vessels with pointed edges drawn as if floating over the land. Daniel's heart beat faster. This is not a tomb. It is a record. The pharaoh met beings from the sky and they gave him this chamber. Omar frowned. "That cannot be. The pharaohs ruled thousands of years ago. You are saying that sky people walked this earth before history was written?" "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "And they left something here. This chamber is not human work. It is too perfect, too powerful. No tools of that age could shape walls like this or create light without fire." He traced his fingers across another panel. The carvings continued, showing the pharaoh seated on the golden throne. Behind him, light spread outward, reaching across the desert, touching temples, rivers, and entire cities. People bowed before the light, their faces lifted in awe. But as the story went on, the carvings darkened. Figures shielded their eyes, their faces twisted in pain. Some collapsed, blinded by the very light that once gave them hope. Omar's voice was low. The gold blinded all who saw. "It is the curse told in the stories." Daniel nodded slowly. "But not a curse of magic. It is the curse of power." The light was too strong. It gave, but it also destroyed. At the final carving, Daniel stopped. The pharaoh stood alone, his arms raised high as the tall sky beings vanished into the heavens. The glowing spheres were gone from their hands. The pharaoh seemed smaller, weaker, as if abandoned by the very ones who had blessed him. Around him, his people knelt, but their faces were filled with fear. The last mark showed the chamber itself being sealed, hidden under the sands. Daniel stepped back, his mind racing. The carvings were not just history. They were a warning. The pharaoh had been trusted with a gift of power, but that power had harmed his people. In the end, the chamber had been locked away, left for time to bury. Omar looked at him uneasy. "If this is true, then we should leave it buried." The pharaoh could not control it. How could we? Daniel tightened the cloth over his eyes and stared at the golden patterns. Because humanity has changed. The Pharaoh may have failed, but we have grown. We must understand what this is, or the desert will keep it secret forever. The chamber hummed softly as though responding to his words. Daniel touched the throne again and the walls flickered. For a moment, the carvings themselves seemed to move, the tall beings shifting slightly as if alive. The glow ran across their carved eyes and Daniel felt a chill. Omar stepped back quickly. Daniel, do not touch it again. You are waking it. But Daniel could not pull away. He felt a connection, like a thread tying him to the chamber. The throne was warm under his hand, almost welcoming. The more he touched it, the clearer the carvings became, glowing with lines of light that traced across the entire hall. He saw more now, patterns hidden behind the main story. They were not pictures, but diagrams, shapes of circles within circles, straight lines connecting glowing points. It looked like a design for something far beyond their world. Daniel whispered, "It is not only history, it is instruction." The Pharaoh was given knowledge, not just treasure. Omar's eyes widened. Knowledge of what? Daniel's voice trembled. Of the sun, of power greater than fire, greater than stone, a power that could change the earth. The hum in the chamber grew stronger. The golden light flickered like the beating of wings. Dust fell from the ceiling and the ground beneath them rumbled. The chamber seemed restless, as though it had heard its story spoken aloud for the first time in centuries. Omar grabbed Daniel's arm. "We should leave. This place is alive. It does not want us here." But Daniel shook his head, his eyes fixed on the glowing patterns. "No, Omar, it has waited for someone. It has waited for us." The chamber pulsed again, and for the first time Daniel felt the warmth not as heat but as a voice, silent yet clear, echoing inside his mind. It was not words but a call. The Pharaoh's sun chamber had begun to speak. The chamber shook with a low rumble that rolled across the golden walls. The light pulsed brighter, then dimmed again like a living heartbeat. Daniel kept his hand on the throne, his mind filled with a strange hum that seemed to whisper without words. Omar pulled at his sleeve, his face pale in the glow. "Daniel, we must go. This place is not safe. The walls move, the air burns, and the men outside are afraid." But Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the glowing lines. "No, Omar, this is not only a chamber. It is a prison. The Pharaoh locked something inside and it has waited all this time." Omar froze. "A prison? You mean this light, this gold is not treasure?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "Not treasure. Containment. The Pharaoh's people thought it was a gift, but it was never meant to be touched. It was built to hold back what even he could not control." The golden walls around them shifted again. What once looked like simple decoration now appeared as layered barriers, each glowing with its own light. The lines crossed and overlapped like chains woven from fire. The air grew hotter, pressing down on their lungs. Daniel stepped closer to the wall. He lifted the cloth from his eyes just slightly, squinting through the painful glare. Beneath the gold he saw cracks, faint but real. Energy leaked through them in thin beams, stabbing into the air like knives of light. He pulled the cloth back quickly, but the sight stayed burned into his vision. "The walls are breaking," Daniel whispered. "This place is weakening after all these years." Omar swallowed hard. "And if the walls fail?" Daniel looked at him, his face tense. "Then what the Pharaoh tried to bury will rise again." A loud sound echoed through the chamber, metal straining against metal, though there was no metal here. The golden light flared suddenly, forcing both men to shield their eyes. The throne vibrated under Daniel's hand. For one terrifying moment he felt as though the entire hall might collapse. Then the light steadied, but it no longer looked like before. Now the walls seemed alive, shifting with shapes that moved within the glow. Daniel caught glimpses of something trapped behind the gold, something that pressed against its prison. It had no clear form. Sometimes it looked like fire, sometimes like a storm of light, but always it reached outward, as if it wanted freedom. Omar let out a long breath. "They came like gods, and you spoke to them as if they were men." "Daniel, are you mad?" Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on the glowing throne. His voice was quiet but filled with fire. "No, Omar, I am human, and that is enough." The desert outside was quiet, but the chamber pulsed with life. Daniel and Omar remained inside, their eyes still protected by cloth against the lingering glow. The golden walls hummed faintly, a soft vibration that seemed to speak directly to the mind. Daniel's fingers hovered above the throne. The light inside the cracks no longer seemed threatening. Instead, it beckoned like a secret waiting to be understood. He knew the aliens had returned, but now they were gone, leaving him with the chamber and its gift. "I still do not understand," Omar said, his voice low. "The Pharaoh built this for power. The aliens came to guard it. And yet we are still alive. What is this thing truly?" Daniel exhaled, trying to steady himself. "It is not treasure, Omar, not gold, not wealth. The Pharaoh's sun chamber holds a fragment of a star, a piece of light so strong that it can blind, burn, or even destroy if uncontrolled. That is why the Pharaoh locked it away. That is why the aliens came." Omar's eyes widened. "A fragment of a star? How can that be inside the earth?" Daniel knelt near the throne. "It is energy, Omar, pure powerful energy. The Pharaoh did not understand it, and neither did humanity back then. But it is not meant to be feared forever. It is meant to be studied, controlled, and respected. That is the true treasure." A faint pulse ran through the throne as Daniel's hands brushed its surface. Light ran up his arms and across his chest, warm but not painful. The hum in the chamber grew stronger, vibrating through the walls and floor. Daniel felt the pulse in his chest in rhythm with the golden heartbeat of the chamber itself. Omar stepped closer, still wary. "And you think humans can control this?" The Pharaoh could not. Even the aliens struggled. Daniel looked at him, his eyes steady. "We are not the Pharaoh." He feared power. "We seek understanding. That is the difference. If we fail, we learn from it. If we succeed, we can bring knowledge to the world." The chamber reacted instantly. The golden walls flared brighter, and patterns shifted, forming new lines that connected the throne to the carvings on the walls. Symbols that Daniel had never seen before glowed with purpose, guiding him like instructions. A voice, faint but clear, entered his mind. Not words, but meaning. It told him to reach deeper, to touch the core, to learn its nature without letting it escape. Daniel's heart raced. The chamber was not only alive, it was teaching him. Omar stared in disbelief. "It speaks to you. You can hear it?" Daniel nodded. "It is not sound. It is energy. It wants to show us, not harm us. The Pharaoh tried to take it as treasure. We are here to understand it as knowledge." Carefully, Daniel pressed his palms on the throne. The golden surface shifted, revealing a small hollow beneath. Inside floated a sphere of light, brighter than anything Daniel had ever seen. It pulsed with warmth and life, as if it were the heart of a star trapped in stone. Omar stepped back, shielding his eyes. "That is impossible. You cannot hold a star in your hands." Daniel stared at it, mesmerized. "I am not holding it. I am feeling it. It chooses who can approach. The Pharaoh failed because he took without respect. The aliens guarded because humans were not ready. But I think it has chosen us, Omar. It has chosen me." The sphere pulsed once, then again, as though acknowledging him. Energy flowed from it into the throne, down through the cracks in the walls and into Daniel's mind. Knowledge poured in, images of stars, distant planets, and energy flowing in ways humanity had never imagined. He could feel physics bending, light moving like water, energy creating shapes that no human hand could build. Omar whispered, "Daniel, this is too much." "You cannot," Daniel interrupted gently. "I know, Omar, that is why we must be careful. The aliens warned us. This power is not for greed. It is for understanding." The chamber thrummed with approval. The golden walls shimmered, the cracks fading as the light stabilized. For the first time, Daniel felt calm in the presence of such immense power. He understood the chamber's lesson. Respect and knowledge could contain even the brightest star. Omar stepped closer, curiosity overtaking fear. "So this is the treasure? Not gold, not wealth, but understanding?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, that is the gift the Pharaoh could not use and the aliens could not trust. But humanity can grow from it, not through greed, not through pride, but through courage and respect." The sphere of light pulsed once more, and Daniel felt a bond between himself and the chamber. He realized he could leave it undisturbed, study it safely, and bring knowledge to the world without releasing the danger inside. Omar smiled faintly, hope returning to his eyes. "Then we have a chance to learn without destroying ourselves." Daniel looked at the golden walls, now calm and steady. "Yes, and when the world is ready, this star will teach it. For now, we guard it, we understand it, and we respect it. That is the true treasure of the Pharaoh's sun chamber." The desert night outside remained quiet, the stars shining as if approving the choice made below. The chamber hummed softly, no longer threatening but alive with purpose. Daniel and Omar knew their journey was far from over, but for the first time they felt hope. Humanity had touched a piece of the sun and lived to learn from it. The golden light bathed the chamber in a warm glow, not blinding but gentle. Daniel tightened the cloth around his eyes, smiling faintly. They had uncovered the true power hidden by the Pharaoh, and now it was their responsibility to guide it wisely. The chamber had chosen them as guardians, and they would not fail. The desert sun had risen over the dunes when Daniel and Omar finally emerged from the pyramid. The golden glow of the Pharaoh's sun chamber was sealed beneath the stone slab once more. The air above was crisp and quiet, the kind of silence that made one aware of the vastness of the world. Daniel held a small crystal shard in his hand, taken carefully from the golden walls. It pulsed faintly, warm like a heartbeat. Omar looked at him with both awe and worry. "Daniel, that thing, it is alive. We barely survived inside, yet you carry it freely." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but it chose me. The chamber's light is not just power. It is knowledge. This shard is a fragment of the star, and it carries everything the Pharaoh could not control, everything the aliens protected. Now it is ours to study and protect." The men who had fled the chamber stared at Daniel with a mix of fear and admiration. They had only seen the golden hall from the entrance, but even that was enough to change them. Their minds could not fully grasp what Daniel had seen, yet they felt that humanity had touched something greater than themselves. Daniel took a deep breath and looked around at the endless desert. This is only the beginning. The world above ground does not know the truths hidden below. We have a responsibility to learn from what we found and to use it wisely. Omar smiled faintly. "Do you really think humans can handle it?" Daniel looked down at the crystal shard, its soft glow reflecting in his eyes. "They can. They just have to choose courage over fear, knowledge over greed. The Pharaoh failed because he wanted power. We want understanding. That is the difference." They began their journey back to the expedition camp. The desert stretched endlessly, but Daniel felt lighter. The shard did not burn him. It guided him. Every pulse of light from the crystal reminded him of the chamber, the Pharaoh, and the aliens. It reminded him of responsibility. Omar backed away quickly. "Daniel, that is not for us. We cannot stand against what lives inside there. We must leave now before it breaks free." But Daniel's heart pounded with a strange mix of fear and wonder. "No, Omar, do you not see? The Pharaoh did not build this to hold his treasure. He built it to hold a fragment of the sun itself. That is what blinds, that is what burns. He caged a piece of the stars." Omar shook his head, disbelief clear on his face. "A piece of the sun? That is impossible." "Impossible to us," Daniel answered. "Not to them. The beings who gave this chamber knew how to take power from the heavens. And the Pharaoh, proud and greedy, believed he could command it. But it blinded his people, and in the end it had to be sealed away." The chamber trembled again, harder than before. Small pieces of dust rained down from the ceiling, and cracks spread along the stone floor. One of the golden beams struck the ground only inches away from Daniel's feet, leaving a black scar where it touched. Daniel pulled Omar back just in time. "Do not step near the light. It burns through stone as if it were paper." The hum in the chamber grew louder, no longer soft but angry, like a storm building inside the walls. Daniel knew they had little time. The prison was failing, and the power inside would not stay hidden much longer. Omar's voice shook. "If this is true, then why stay? Why not run while we can?" Daniel looked at him, his eyes steady. "Because if this breaks free, it will not stay here. The desert, the cities, even the rivers, all could burn. Someone must understand how to stop it." Omar clenched his fists, torn between fear and loyalty. "Then you mean to stay even if it kills you?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "If it kills me, at least the world will know the truth. But if I succeed, then humanity will gain what the Pharaoh could not control." The chamber shook once more, and this time the golden throne itself began to glow. Daniel placed both hands on it, steadying himself as energy surged through his arms. He gritted his teeth against the heat, but he did not let go. He felt the hum grow sharper, filling his head until it was almost a voice. It was not a voice of words, but of warning. A feeling pressed into his mind. Stay away, stay buried, do not release. The Pharaoh's sun chamber was speaking, not to welcome, but to warn. Daniel's vision blurred as he pulled back. His body shook and sweat ran down his face. Omar caught him before he fell. "Enough," Omar said firmly. "You cannot fight this light." "It is beyond us." Daniel looked up at the glowing throne. His voice was weak but determined. Perhaps beyond the Pharaoh. Perhaps beyond us now. But not forever. One day humanity will not fear the sun. We will master it. The chamber's hum faded to a low growl as though the prison disagreed. Yet Daniel felt certain. The Pharaoh had tried to keep the light locked away. But Daniel believed mankind was not meant to hide from such power. They were meant to claim it. The golden walls flickered once more, chains of light straining against the force they held. And in the silence that followed, Daniel realized the greatest danger was not what lay inside the chamber. It was the cracks spreading wider with every heartbeat. The prison would not hold forever. The desert night was quiet above the buried pyramid. The stars shone bright in the black sky, and the dunes stretched endlessly like waves frozen in time. But that calm did not last. Strange lights flickered far above, moving in patterns no star should make. At first, the workers who had fled the chamber thought they were seeing tricks of the eyes. But the lights grew larger, descending slowly and silently until the shapes of great craft appeared against the heavens. They did not roar like planes or rumble like storms. They moved with a grace too smooth for anything made by man. The frightened men dropped to the sand, whispering prayers. Some ran into the dunes, but most could not move. They watched as 3 silver shapes lowered themselves near the ruins. The ships were sharp-edged, glowing faintly, and the sand beneath them shifted as if drawn by unseen force. Inside the chamber, Daniel and Omar felt the ground tremble again. This time it was not from the walls, but from above. A faint hum spread downward through the stone, different from the heartbeat of the golden prison. Daniel's eyes widened. "They are here," he whispered. Omar frowned. "Who is here?" "The ones who built this," Daniel said firmly. "The Pharaoh's gods. The sky people." A moment later, a beam of white light pierced through the cracks above the chamber. It spread across the golden floor, bright but not burning. Shapes began to form within the light. Tall figures stepping downward as though the beam were a stair. Omar staggered back. "By the heavens!" Daniel stood still, his breath caught. The carvings on the walls had shown these beings, and now they were real before his eyes. They were tall, slender, with skin that shimmered like silver under the chamber's glow. Their arms were long, their eyes dark and wide, filled with an old weight. The tallest one stepped forward, raising a hand. Its voice did not echo with sound, but pressed directly into their minds. "You awaken what was never meant to wake," the being said. "This chamber is not yours to open." Omar fell to his knees, trembling. But Daniel stood tall, though his heart pounded. "This chamber lies on Earth. It is part of our history now. If it holds danger, we deserve to know. If it holds power, we have a right to learn." The tall being turned its gaze on him. "You speak with courage, human. Yet courage blinds as much as light." The Pharaoh spoke with the same fire. His pride burned his people. "You would follow his steps?" Daniel clenched his fists. "The Pharaoh may have failed, but humanity is not the same. We grow, we learn, we build. You cannot lock away truth forever. Not from us." The chamber pulsed as if reacting to his words. The golden walls flared brighter, cracks spreading wider. The imprisoned light strained against its bonds, and a low roar filled the hall. The beings shifted, their silver forms glowing faintly as they lifted their hands toward the walls. They were holding the prison together. Daniel realized it at once. These were not gods of blessing. They were wardens, guardians who had sealed the fragment long ago and had returned now to maintain it. Omar whispered, "They are not here for us. They are here for the chamber. They fear what is inside." The lead being spoke again. "We gave the Pharaoh a choice. He begged for power and we warned him of the cost. Still he reached for the sun. His people suffered and we sealed his gift away. Now you disturb it once more." Daniel stepped forward, his voice steady. "If you gave it once, you will give it again. We will not be kept blind forever. Humanity will not bow to fear." The chamber trembled violently. The golden walls flared like fire, and a beam of raw light burst through a crack, striking the floor. Stone shattered and the air grew searing hot. Omar dragged Daniel back, but the tall beings raised their hands, weaving a net of silver glow around the crack. The light slowed, pressed back into the wall, but the effort strained them. Their tall bodies bent under the force. The lead being turned its gaze back to Daniel. "Do you not see? Even we struggle to bind this fire. You are but dust before the sun." Daniel's voice shook but did not falter. "Dust we may be, but dust that dares." The Pharaoh begged. "I do not beg. I claim what is hidden because it belongs to the world that bore me." The chamber went silent for a long moment. Only the hum of the prison remained, deep and low. The beings studied him with their dark, endless eyes. Finally, the lead one spoke softer than before. Your kind is dangerous because it refuses to kneel. That is why the stars watch you with caution. Perhaps one day you will burn brighter than even the fire you seek. But not today. Today you cannot hold it. It raised its hand and the light around the throne dimmed. The cracks in the wall stopped spreading, though faint scars remained. The prison was sealed again for now. Daniel felt both relief and anger. Relief that the chamber did not break open. Anger that the truth was being locked away once more. He looked at the being firmly. You cannot hide it forever. Humanity will return. We always do. The tall being tilted its head as though considering his words. Then it spoke one final time. Then let it be so. When the chamber breaks again, your people may choose their path. But remember this, light gives life, but it also blinds. Choose carefully. With that, the being stepped back into the white beam. The light rose upward, and in moments they were gone. Silence returned, broken only by the steady hum of the golden walls. At the camp, Daniel showed the shard to Omar and the few men who had stayed behind. They examined it carefully, but none could fully grasp its nature. Even with the shard in their hands, it seemed untouchable, something that demanded respect rather than possession. Daniel said, "This is not treasure. Do not think of it as gold. It is a key, a teacher. If we study it patiently, humanity will learn how to use energy, how to harness the sun itself safely. If we fail, we lose everything. That is why we must guard it, not exploit it." Omar nodded. "We will follow your lead, Daniel. Whatever you decide, we are with you." As the days passed, Daniel began experiments with the shard under strict safety measures. Even its smallest pulse illuminated entire rooms, yet it did not burn when handled with care. He began to understand the patterns, the flow of energy, the rhythm of the light. The shard seemed to respond to thought and intention, not force. It was as if the Pharaoh's sun chamber itself was teaching him slowly, step by step. Word of the pyramid's discovery spread, but Daniel carefully controlled the information. The world would not yet know the full truth. Humanity was not ready for the sun trapped in gold. For now it would remain hidden, studied quietly by those willing to respect it. One night Daniel stood on the dunes, the shard glowing softly in his hands. The desert wind carried the cool air across his face. Above, the stars shone brightly, and he felt the presence of the aliens watching from far away. They had tested humanity and allowed him a glimpse, but they had not fully trusted him yet. Daniel whispered softly, "We will not fail. We will learn. We will grow." Omar, standing beside him, said quietly, "You carry the light of a star in your hands. Humanity will follow if we do this right." Daniel smiled. "Not follow blindly, Omar. Learn, understand, protect. That is how we grow. That is what the Pharaoh could not do, and that is why the chamber was hidden for so long." The shard pulsed once, bright and steady, as if approving his words. Daniel understood that it was not the end of their journey but the beginning. Humanity had touched a fragment of the sun, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. The golden chamber remained sealed beneath the desert, silent and radiant, guarding its secrets for the time when the world would be ready. But Daniel and Omar now held the spark of knowledge that could change everything. Daniel looked toward the horizon, the rising sun casting long shadows across the dunes. "We have a spark of the stars, Omar, and one day we will use it to reach higher, to grow stronger and to shine brighter than any pharaoh could have imagined." Omar smiled. "Then let's make sure humanity is ready for it." The desert wind carried the quiet promise of the future. The shard pulsed softly in Daniel's hands, a gentle reminder that the Pharaoh's secret was no longer just a story buried beneath the sands. It was now a gift for those who dared to learn. Daniel knew their work had only begun, but he felt hope unlike anything he had ever known. The world would see the light one day, and humanity would rise to meet it. The Pharaoh's sun chamber had given them a spark, and now it was up to humanity to turn that spark into a new dawn. Word count: 810.